I want to begin just by thanking all of those who have decided that they won't stand again in the next round. Not thanking them for not standing again. Don't let me finish the sentence. Thanking them for their service and their commitment in being part of this synod. I am really grateful for the diligence and engagement of those who have decided that it is time to hand over to someone else. And for those of you who are standing again, which I suspect is the majority of you, thank you for your continuing service and your continuing willingness to serve. The theme I'm going to address is church buildings, which is a theme of today's synod. I want to start by just talking about yesterday, or yesterday for me. And it was Suffolk Day, as you may have noticed. I hope you noticed. I hope you participated in some way or other in celebrating that. And for me, that meant beginning in Haverhill in the Market Square, which was the occasion for the proclamation of Suffolk Day, the occasion for the awarding of the Suffolk Medals. And we were in the square, and I made the mistake of not wearing a hat. We're just used to expecting rain. It wasn't raining, it was very hot. And we were sat there as the presentations went on. And we were, of course, right next to St. Mary's Church, which is, those of you who know Haverhill will know that St. Mary's Church occupies a very prominent site on the edge of the square. It's an early 1300s origin. The building was severely burned down in 1667 and then rebuilt. But it's a magnificent building and is very clearly part of the fabric of the centre of Haverhill. And Max Drinkwater, the vicar, one of those, talked about Haverhill being on the edge of Suffolk. But being on the edge meant being a place of discovery and creativity. And that the church, being on the edge of the square, very prominently on the edge of the square, was therefore itself, to the town, a place of creativity and discovery, which was then reflected in the way in which everybody who was involved in the celebrations moved into the church for conversation and to have some refreshments. But a sense that the civic leadership and the other county leadership had moved into that space of edgy creativity and discovery. Various meanderings during the day with Jutta and myself. So one of the glorious things about the day was that Jutta and I meant we were able to spend half of it together. We ended up having supper the other side of the county at the Queen's Head in Blyford. And across the road is the 11th century, simply whitewashed interior building of that parish church. It is a small, it's a modest church, beautifully kept, and in all of that, typical of many of our church buildings. And a memorial as if to underline that simplicity and that modesty is in the churchyard of a ploughman carved in stone with a couple of Suffolk punches. But as well as the peaceful interior and the prayerful interior, what captured me was the glorious churchyard, dedicated to conservation with a lottery heritage plaque to prove it. And I discovered just a moment ago from Dominic, the rector there, that the process of engaging with the project of conservation in the churchyard has actually generated lots of engagement from people in the village and from neighbouring villages. So as he put it, having the confidence to do that, people will then, and being positive about it, people will then respond as they have indeed. Then on, continuing my day, to Blythburgh, to the Cathedral of the Marshes on the site of the church. Church has been on that site since 680. This 15th century building, you all know, is the most extraordinary, magnificent building. And I was there, or Jutta and I were there, along with many hundreds of other people, for an astonishing performance of Britain's Curlew River. It's an incredibly powerful operatic drama, a profoundly sacred drama about healing through grief. And the monks who frame the events declare that they have come to show a mystery of the sign of God's grace, a healing grace that flows from prayer. 3 very different church buildings, different parts of the county, every one of them pointing to the transcendent, what is missing in our age, pointing there by the space and beauty of the buildings themselves and by their settings, and then by what they point to, by the activities that they host, the civic gathering, shortly to be followed by a cafe church service in Haverhill, the peaceful, prayerful quiet in Byford, and the focus on the care of the churchyard, and the sensational performance of Curlew River in Blythburgh, which was actually filmed and will be on television in a couple of months' time. Those 3 experiences yesterday, and of course this 4th of being in this beautiful space today, showed me once again the many ways in which our church buildings are, in the words of the monks in Curlew River, signs of God's grace, places of mystery, of encounter and prayer, of encounter with the transcendent, of encounter with the reality of the presence of Jesus Christ. They are familiar buildings in our communities proclaiming the unfamiliar. As Max Drinkwater said at St Mary's Haverhill, in the centre and on the edge, places of discovery and creativity. Yesterday for the civic leaders and authorities, inviting them to see the world differently. They are buildings that speak to us of prayer and of God's presence in creation. At Blyford, proclaiming there our call to care for creation far better than we have been doing, and places of sacred encounter in music, drama, and of course worship. Curlew River in Blythburgh was all 3 of those. And let me just add in parenthesis how thrilled I was that Roger Wright was knighted in the birthday honours, a faithful servant of the church who has brought beauty and transcendent to so many during his career and in these last 10 years at Snape Maltings. He and I would often joke together that his congregations were usually larger than mine. There is in all of this something of the recovery of the sense of what a church building was for in the medieval period and indeed before that. But I just want to underline my sense that the building simply being there is a proclamation of the gospel, as it speaks of something both familiar and unfamiliar. But we have to do things to bring that to life, to point to faith. I remember when I started in my previous job as principal of Westcott House, right next door to the college was All Saints Church, a fabulous Victorian building under the care of the Church's Conservation Trust, a building full of arts and crafts decorations, so the walls lined with William Morris wallpaper. The narrative I inherited when I got there was this huge closed church was a symbol of the church's decline. That's a self-fulfilling narrative. So we turned it instead into a sign of the living gospel, simply first by opening it up every day, and then by increasingly using it as a place of prayer and worship and gathering. Keeping our Suffolk churches open, as the great majority are, is a first step. And then clear and helpful information, notice boards that you can read, websites, and notice boards that are up to date as well, websites, pathways to faith, and the heart of worship and prayer, and all those other activities that are complementary to them, by which people come through the doors and taste the fruits of faith. Those are the next steps. When I came to this diocese, I recognized that sustaining our church buildings was a key challenge, and it still is. But we are making progress, and we are going to hear about some of this shortly. Archdeacon David has helped us with the buildings group to look at complementary uses, which work in some places and not others, of course, but looking at creative partnerships responding to the needs of our communities, whether for young or old, for health, for food, for well-being. All of these we see across our towns and villages. Being canny then about finding ways that some of them can generate income, and looking at social enterprise as part of the means of doing that. The challenge of net zero is simply a challenge to be at the forefront of caring for creation, a call that has resonances with people, including the young, across our communities. Care for our buildings, care for our creation, and enabling the witness of our buildings and their congregations to flourish are all bound up together. We cannot do this on our own. Partnerships are crucial, and there are willing partners in this county, including the county council, on the environment, on health, on well-being, and a host of other areas. We know from the experience of top-up shops in Ipswich and well-being and social gatherings in so many of our churches that the call to respond, to show and share the love of Christ is there in so many ways. Now, of course, some of our churches will not be able to host more than worship and individual prayer. Some need to be moved to occasional use, possibly under the so-called festival church arrangements. I completely understand that. Money is a huge challenge. We're enormously grateful to the partnership with the Suffolk Historic Churches Trust and other bodies. But we also know that we need to continue to seek a national solution for maintenance and upkeep. The government's Taylor Review, some of you will remember, for which we were a pilot, promised much and delivered little. We need to rejoin that debate at a national level. So now, I look forward to hearing what we're going to hear this morning, and I've committed to leaving my successor with a plan and with the work of a small group that we've been gathering together, trying to join up the various elements of this challenge. I believe we will be able to do that. Our churches are treasures, treasures that can proclaim by their presence the gospel of Jesus Christ in our time, and I want them to continue to be so for generations to come. Speaking of treasures that proclaim by their presence the gospel of Jesus Christ, Mike. This is your last St. Edmundsbury and Ipswich Diocesan Synod. Mike and I were having a conversation. We have, I say, 479 church buildings in this diocese. It may or be one or two variants of that, but let's say 479. I asked him how many he's got in Exeter. 595. You've got some sympathy there. I hope that some of what we're doing here, Mike, will help you, and that you will let us know from there of what you think will help us. Now, this is not a farewell, that we're going to have occasions for that later, but it is to thank you, Mike, on behalf of Synod, for the extraordinary treasure that you are to every one of us and to this diocese, for one who gives us both the familiar and the unfamiliar to see afresh the gospel of Jesus Christ. Thank you.